Welcome to the Write the Damn Book Already podcast. My name is Elizabeth Lyons. I'm a 5-time author, and I teach people how to write and publish powerful, thought-provoking nonfiction and memoir without overthinking or getting caught up in extreme overwhelm. Because your story and message matter, and it's about to become someone's very favorite resource. For more book writing, publishing, and how the heck do I move through this glitch tips and solutions, and plenty of free resources, visit publishaprofitablebook.com. Hi, and welcome to this next episode of Write the Damn Book Already. I am so thrilled to bring you this conversation with my new friend, Dr. Tanmeet Sethi, whose book, Joy is My Justice, Reclaim What Is Yours, launches today. Today, May 2nd, 2023, this book is available for everyone to purchase, and I could not be more thrilled about that. I was very grateful to have received an advance copy of the book, and as you'll discover in this conversation, I didn't read it as fast as I read some books, and there was a very, very good reason for that. The book is absolutely incredible. The word I use to describe it is dense, and I use that in a very positive way. In this instance, there is just so much to absorb, and there are so many things that she brought together to create this story that frankly flows so incredibly well. And I was really excited to talk to her about exactly how she did that. There are so many aspiring authors I speak with who say, Elizabeth, I have so much that I want to share. I don't know if it's multiple books. I don't know how to get it all into one book. If I get it all into one book, I don't know how to make sure that it's not War and Peace level in size. I don't know how to make sure that I'm not hopping all over the place. And Tanmeet was so honest about exactly what went into the writing, finding an agent, the editing, like everything that she actually went through. I'm thinking of retitling this podcast, Write the Damn Book Already, an unscripted reality show of book writing, because that's what I'm so interested in getting to the core of when I talk to authors is exactly what went into it. We see the final product. It's very easy, thank God, through a number of other podcasts and platforms to hear more about what the book is about. But what I want to know is how did you feel while you were writing it? What hiccups did you run into? What did you learn about yourself? How did this process expand you as a person? All of those sorts of things. So I know you're going to love this episode, and please go out today and order yourself a copy of Joy is My Justice. It's available everywhere books are sold. And speaking of books, very quickly, I will simply interject that if you are not yet aware, Write the Damn Book Already, my latest book, is now available as an audiobook. And yes, it is me narrating. So if you have been wondering what to spend your latest Audible credit on, or have otherwise been looking for a great book to listen to while you are driving, vacuuming, doing the laundry, taking a walk, gardening, whatever it is you do, might I suggest Write the Damn Book Already. It is available on Audible and also everywhere audiobooks are sold. I would love to hear what you think. Please know that you can always message me on Instagram at Elizabeth Lyons Author or email me at elizabeth@elizabethlyons.com. Let's get on with this incredible conversation with Dr. Tanmeet Sethi. So today is the day, and Joy is My Justice is out in the world. And I was so thrilled to get the net galley of this and be able to review it. And I did not pour through it. I'm not going to lie. I needed to really sit with a lot of it. It's incredible. It's not, there are some books that we tout as, oh my God, this was such a fast read. And that's a compliment. And I think sometimes to say that a book is a slow read is also a compliment. I really wanted to devour and be in because there's so much wisdom in this book.
Oh, thank you so much.
And it's coming from so many different angles. And so, as you and I have talked about, I love, when I was first starting businesses, which I feel like, oh my God, multiple lifetimes, but I was so fascinated with the backstory of successful entrepreneurs. I loved to see where they were in their air quote success. And I loved to hear the tips that they had at that point. But I was more interested in what was it like when you were first starting and you didn't know how you were going to pay your bills, and you didn't know if you were ever going to have another customer, and people were telling you this was a crazy idea. I wanted to know that part of the story. And so when I talk with authors, I want to know, what was it like to sit down and start with a blank page? And I don't know that I've ever been more curious about that than while reading your book, because it is so full of great stuff that just spans all different things. I mean, you're an integrative physician, you're a mom, there's all these different aspects. So I'm curious, how was that to just sit down and go, here we go? Did it all just pour out of you in 4 hours, Tanmeet? Like, how did this work?
Oh gosh, let no one believe that lie. Right? Well, first I will say that I had the privilege of working when I started this. So props out there to all the writers who are trying to do this and make it support them at the same time. I had this sort of creative luxury at that time, right? So I will honor that privilege here. But I remember distinctly when I started writing this book, and it was on a family vacation, really just outside of Seattle. And I had my journal with me, and I've been an on and off consistent, that's how I call it, on and off consistent journaler for my whole life. And, sometimes I'm just flowing in my journal and sometimes I can't even look at it. But I had my journal and I just started writing, and it did pour out, but not the whole book. That's a lie if anyone tells you that. But things started pouring out, and it felt like, oh, I think I have a book, even though I was so far from there, right? But
that's what I was going to ask you. Did it start as journaling and then turn into a book, or was it, I think I want to write a book and I'm going to write it through journaling? It sounds like it was the former.
Yeah. And it really felt like, so I'll tell you, when I first started this book, I thought it was a book on suffering. And I really wrote it because people would say, how do you manage suffering in your own life and also in your day-to-day profession, seeing so much of it? And then I started writing more and more on my journal, and I thought, wait a second, this is not a book about suffering. It's a book about joy. And it really turned everything on its head. And then I knew I had a book.
I find that beyond fascinating, because the number of people I've spoken with who started with one thing and then it subtly morphed into something else, I think that happens to the majority of people, actually.
Yeah, that's what I've been learning.
The unfortunate thing is that when that happens to people, they feel like they've messed up somehow. Like, we're going off the rails. They think that there's some victory in staying committed to the original vision. And I'm like, look at any business, look at any relationship, things morph, they evolve.
Yes.
And
it seems like the key is just to get started, right? Go with where you are. Write the damn book already. I mean, go with where you are. I've heard you talk about this actually really eloquently, just that getting into action is really, who knows what will come of it, but stop conceiving of it in your head, because what comes out on paper is far more wise and bigger than what you can think of.
And some days it's far worse. Like, I was listening to a podcast the other day, and I'm trying to remember who was saying it, but she was saying that when she was writing her book, she would think, oh, I know what it was. It was the podcast called On Being with Krista Tippett. It's a wonderful podcast. And she was interviewing Rick Rubin, who was one of the co-founders of Def Jam Records. She said, when I sit down to write, sometimes I think this is the most amazing thing I have ever written. And then I come back later and I read it and I'm like, this is garbage.
Oh my God. I think you posted recently where I said this resonates. I forget how you put it, but literally while I was writing this book, after I get a book deal, after it seems like somebody thinks I have something worth writing, right? I spent vacillated day by day in a sense of, I am going to be on Oprah. This is so good. And then the next day, like,
she doesn't have a show. I mean, she has Soul Sundays, but yeah.
right. I mean, but I'm still from that era. And then vacillating to like, who thought that they would ever put this in a book? I mean, this is never gonna, I'm embarrassed. I mean, literally day by day. And when I read your post, I thought, oh God, thank God everybody thinks that.
Yes. And unfortunately, we don't realize that everyone thinks that. And I can't tell you the number of people I've talked to who one day they'll be like, this is happening. Because I'm from the same era, right? We all wanted to be on Oprah, on Ellen. Now neither's a possibility. It's devastating. But like, I'm going to be on Oprah. This is going to happen. And then it's like, is anyone going to buy this? What was I thinking? Vacillation between those two things is just part of the journey.
Yes. And
right?
Actually, it's not unlike, I don't know if you've gotten to the part where I talk about self-compassion, but that's a very important seed for a joy practice. And it's actually, the spoiler alert, it's the seed for everything, right? And to understand that it's not about, for me, I've finally understood, it was a kind of reflecting back to me in the book even, that it's not about whether I believe this is good every day. It's whether I can relate to that critical mind and understand that that's just a part of my nervous system trying to protect me from the fear of, will anyone read this, and putting my heart in the world, and understanding that the way I relate to that then is the journey. It isn't whether I believe it every day or not. Does that?
Yes. And believe it or not, that is the place of the book I'm at right now.
Oh, so funny.
Yeah. And I think what I was just reading yesterday, it was the piece about, how we talk to ourselves and catching ourselves. You were such a beautiful way of illustrating one of your practices, I believe, where you put your hand on your heart when you feel yourself speaking to yourself in an uncompassionate way, or seeing yourself in an uncompassionate way. And that really struck me, because I thought, gosh, that's something that no matter where I am, whether I'm in a crowded grocery store, or I'm sitting in my home, or I'm in a crowded room of people and just feeling whatever that way may be, thinking I don't deserve to be here, or what the hell did I just say? That was stupid, whatever. You can just kind of put your hand on your heart, and no one, if that works for you, and no one is going to be like, oh, what is she doing right now?
Yeah.
It doesn't draw attention to you.
Right.
In any
exactly.
crazy way.
And at the same time gives your body really, really biochemically and physiologically that sense of safety, and if they're, I think about all the writers in the world. I mean, thank God for writers. I mean, I've been writing my whole life. This isn't my first time, but I've always wanted to write, and I've been writing shorter forms, and this is the first, long form. And I just think of all the books that opened me up to the world and a way of being, to see myself. And, I could cry when I think about writing and how it's impacted my life. And all the ways that every single writer, even the ones listening today, have to understand and figure out how to feel safe in the world when they put themselves out there, right? That must be such a big part of your coaching.
It absolutely is. And that's why I wrote the book the way that I did, because giving the steps, I mean, yes, that's important. And let's shortcut our way by understanding that we need to understand our core message, and we need to understand our reader, and we need to understand our intention, and those sorts of things. However, that the number of people over the years to whom I've given those steps who still didn't write the book, and then the reasons why, were all so similar. And it's all because we get into our head and think, I just no, because we're afraid, understandably, to put ourselves out there. And I think one of the questions I've asked myself over the years is, all the books that I've read and all the books that you've read that have really touched you and expanded, my perspective and opened my mind to different things. What if that author had decided, I don't think I can do that. I don't think anyone's going to read this. I mean, it would just be that could make me cry, because
right.
right? That's my university. Like that's my life university, is learning about all the things through reading about other people's experience and how they navigate. And
Yeah. And it's sort of, I mean, it's just striking me as we're having this conversation, how there's this way that you, anyone as a writer, me, anyone, if we can really just say, no, it's almost my gift to the world to step into my boldest version of myself, that if those people hadn't done that, I couldn't have done that. And so that's how we're all connected, right? That community, no one writes alone, right? I know people
right.
say, oh, isn't writing lonely? Because I'm used to a very non-lonely profession, right? I'm in the middle of people constantly. And so
Yeah.
people always ask me, does writing feel lonely? And I don't feel it, because first, I'm imagining the people I'm writing to. But secondly, I really feel like there's this world of writers who have gone before me and with me and have taught me how to do this, and that we're all sort of doing it together, although we're separated, right?
It's the energy of it, right? It's the collective energy, which is why I love communities of writers, because even within one of my programs, we all get on Zoom for 5 days every single month for an hour, turn off our video, turn off our audio. I mean, we can keep video, people can keep video on if they want to, but they'd just be seeing my face looking like all manner of what the hell. But, and writing, because it's the collective energy of get your butt in the chair and just do the damn thing. Which is so simple, but not at all easy. Two very different concepts. So I'm curious, can you speak a bit about your journey to an agent and getting the publishing deal?
Yeah. I mean, I went through a lot of queries, and I had, and I had a lot of rejections. So everyone tells the stories. I was sort of preparing myself for that. I couldn't figure out how to pick an agent. I'm so new to this. So people will say, like, I knew I wanted this agent. I'm like, how the hell do you know that? And but I got some really good advice from a friend, mentor, someone I didn't know that well until this process. But he really sat me down and said, Tanmeet, the agent who is the most excited about your book is the agent.
Yeah.
And that really held true, and he said the way that they feel about your book right away is a measure of how much they'll fight for your book.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of what I went on, and that proved to work, and I feel like that was really good advice in life in general. But I think that that's really how I did it. I didn't have a bold understanding of what the hell to do. I had never done this before.
Do you think that was maybe a benefit, like being a
I
little bit
do.
naive to the process?
Yes, because now I'm learning all kinds of things, and I'm like, oh my God, I would have second guessed every step. I'm glad I had no idea. Basically, he told me to get some book, and I just was out there blindly, not understanding how hard this could be.
And it's so interesting. I have tons of, I've been an indie author my whole career, right? And I have lots of great friends and people who I admire and respect who have always been traditionally published. And I don't maintain any opinion on right or wrong. Everyone just has to do what makes the most sense for them. And everyone has their own story, literally, about why they chose the approach that they chose. I think when it comes to the traditional world, I have a couple of friends right now who are adamant about wanting to be in fact, I interviewed Laura Belgray, whose book Tough Titties comes out in like a month.
Yeah.
And I asked her, did you ever consider self-publishing? And she said, no, this was a complete ego play for me. Like, I wanted the traditional deal. And I respected so much how honest she was, not just with me and the people who listen to it, but with herself. Like, this is an ego play. There are many people who feel that way, and I fully support it. If that's where you're at, amazing. What for you has been the most, we try to keep things positive here, the most positive aspect of being with the traditional house?
Yeah, I mean, I think the most positive for me has just been a step-by-step understanding along the way of what's going to happen, right? Because I'm so new to this. And so that was really great. I will tell you, I was fully wanting to self-publish, indie publish, or
Oh, were
however we.
you?
Yeah, because by the time really got into writing this book, I was filled with this mission of, I call myself a joy activist. I mean, I really have a mission to get this book out there and get the message into people's hands and get them the access to their innate human right to their own joy practice. And so it felt almost like such a time urgency that I thought this traditional route sounds really long, which by the way it is.
Yeah.
And
I was
so
going to ask you about that.
I thought, well, I'm just going to do this. And so I was looking to just some help along the way of where do I go next? And then I ended up talking to this friend I was talking about who basically convinced me to go traditional, but said, Tanmeet, I really think you need to do this, try it. And if it doesn't work, it's okay. And I honestly still don't even know. I don't remember how he convinced me, but he did. And so here I am. But I think that But I think that sort of hand-holding was good for me.
Yeah.
Even though I'm a fully resourceful, capable woman, I could have figured it out. But it was really nice to have that.
Absolutely. Well, and I think that happens to a lot of people who are very, again, air quotes, successful in their own right. I mean, you're a physician, for crying out loud. And I talk to many people who are very successful in whatever it is they do as a business owner, but then it comes to a book and all of a sudden they're like, I don't know. Sometimes I think they should know what to do. And it takes them a minute to adjust to the fact that, okay, just because you have gotten these accomplishments in certain other areas doesn't mean that you can get on a unicycle and just ride it with ease. I mean, this is basically getting on a unicycle. It's a whole new thing. And why would you know how this process goes? There's no reason for. What was the total estimated timeline, from query and then getting your agent, selling the book, and then working with the editor and getting to your pub date?
Well, from my query to the agent was pretty fast, but then the agent to putting it into the publisher took probably about 9 months. And that was more because my agent used to be an editor for 25 years. So I lucked out. And she really pins and needles went through my proposal and kind of helped me make it sort of like, let's get this, the best we can. And so she really helped me. And we went back and forth and back and forth. And so I think that was about at least 6 months, maybe 9 months. And then we submitted it to publishers. And then that process was not long. And then we, as they say, had a little auction. And then, and then I was like, what is happening here? And then, I literally, for anyone who thinks that they should know how this works, I would say it's not only humbling, but as an integrative physician, I would tell you it's good for your brain to be completely challenged and brought into a new way of thinking, because that's how, after the age of 40, we all need cognitive challenge. And this was a cognitive challenge for me. And
do we really need that?
Yes. So learning a new sort of way to do things was actually, it was exciting. I found it exciting. So I am really grateful for that process, but it was all new. So yeah. And then, so I'd say the whole thing was about, a 9 to 10 month kind of process.
And then once you got with your editor, how much time was that period working with the editor?
My book is being published, I would say, around 9 months after we were put together.
Okay. I feel like that's quick.
Is it? See,
I could be wrong. I maybe not. Maybe that's a little average. I don't know. I guess I'd have to ask more people about that timeline.
Yeah. In my proposal, I did say I could do it in 6 to 9 months. Again, not knowing.
Right. But I'm just putting this out there, but
yeah. But as you know better than I do, I had the crux of much of this book written already. Now, what I had is vastly, well, I would say at its core, the same and also vastly different.
Okay, tell me about that and how you felt about it when those suggestions were maybe being made.
Yeah, I felt I have to tell you, I am so grateful for my editor. I feel like every time, first of all, I have a new, I mean, I never didn't think editors were good or had skill, but I didn't really understand it. And after working with a fabulous editor for this long, I feel like, oh my God, your job is so hard. All I have to do is write. I'm not really even quite sure how you do what you do to keep all that in your head and to understand the flow, the structure, and oh my gosh. But every time she gave me feedback, I have to tell you, it was spot on. And, like this story doesn't belong in the book. Yeah, you're right. That doesn't go there. The way you're saying this isn't going to work for people. Yeah, I see that now. I couldn't see that then. Right. That kind of thing. So,
Yeah.
and so we just really had a great flow back and forth. And I feel really fortunate about that.
I love that you had that experience because editing is something where it's a partnership for sure. And it can be challenging for an author. I felt this way, to be open to recognizing that feedback is not criticism in this case. It's truly the editor's goal is truly to help you make the book the best that it can possibly be. And so, having as on the author side, having to kind of check your ego at the door, because it's easy to feel defensive or to just feel like, oh my God, there's that much air quotes wrong with this. And start to again question, gosh, should I even be doing this if there's this much about it that's not right? And the answer is no, that's crazy. It's just
Right.
about having a second set of eyes that isn't so intimately familiar, because you don't, as the author, you don't realize what everything's in your head. So it's
Yes.
hard to know what is in your head, but didn't quite make it to the page,
Yes.
and
Yes.
where the reader can kind of go, I'm lost.
Yes.
And you're
And
like, why are you lost? It's all in it's obvious, but it's obvious because it's all in your head. Like it's the same
yes.
way that you'll read a paragraph and it'll be missing a word, but your brain will fill in that word
Yes.
automatically.
Yes.
It's
Yes.
kind of a similar
Yeah. And
phenomenon.
I'm thinking of two things about editing that I would assume come up in your coaching all the time. But one is that, as you know, my book has so much story in it. I mean, actually, much more than my story, others' stories, right?
Yeah.
And it's hard when stories are in your head to understand the difference. It's a fine line. I remember one story that is really potent for me that my editor said, Tanmeet, this story is not yours to tell. And I thought, oh, I can't see that because every story is so embedded in my heart that it feels like a story I have to tell. And for her to have the ability and capacity to nuance that was so powerful for me. So I would say to anyone writing who's using story that, even though in nonfiction, for instance, that, we have to understand that the stories may be potent in our heart, but they may not be the ones that need to be on the page. So that's one thing. And then two was that someone gave me advice that when you get that after your first full manuscript is turned in, when you get that back after a month or two, it took a while, you're going to see a lot of red, proverbially, right? It's no longer red ink, but a lot of track changes, should we say. And take a deep breath. That's not against you. That's for the way I think of it is it wasn't against me. It was in favor of my book, right? Just like
It's
you
in
said, to make
service.
it the best. Yes. Just
Go ahead.
taking a deep breath, right? And just saying, okay, I'm going to look through this. I'm going to take a deep breath and I'm going to sit with it. I'm not going to go try to change it all right away. I'm just going to sit with it. So those two things really, one, I learned along the way, and one I was given as a piece of advice, those really helped me in the editing process, if that helps anyone.
That is such important advice. I'm an editor as well, and I warn all of my clients, my exact words are, the book will be hemorrhaging. Because I changes and it seems to come up in red. So it really does look like a bloodbath. The thing is, when I edit my own stuff, it's hemorrhaging. When my stuff is edited, it's hemorrhaging. And I had a client recently who it really affected her because she is in the journalism world. And so for it to come back hemorrhaging made her really question her skill, her ability. And we just sat with it for a minute. And that's exactly what I said is this is in service of the book. Writing a book is a little different from writing an article in a newspaper, et cetera, et cetera. And by the way, I would far prefer this is me, that someone can tell an incredible story, can just have a beautiful way with language, but doesn't know exactly like where the comma goes or the apostrophe. That's where it starts to hemorrhage more than anything else.
Yeah.
In my experience is because we've got syntax stuff out of whack. But if you just look at the basic comments, which is why I developmental edit first, it's like, I'm confused by this part. Can you say more about this? I'm not sure this is your story to tell. Where are we going with this? That sort of thing. That's not nearly as visually like overwhelming, right? As when you see, sometimes I almost want to say to people, do you want me to just change all the syntax with track changes off?
Seriously.
Because maybe you don't care that, there should be an apostrophe here, whatever. But you said something earlier that I would love to know your perspective on. You said when you were writing for people. So one of my guiding principles, which does not mean it's right, it's just what works for me, is to think about writing to just one person. When you were writing, how did you do it? Were you writing for one person or was there kind of a group? How did you approach that?
Yeah, I mean, I know exactly what you're talking about. And for me, it was more than one person. But I think that's also because when I think about trauma, suffering, and oppression, I think of so many communities, right? So I definitely wasn't only writing for a mother like me who was suffering. I definitely wasn't only writing for someone who was at Marjorie Stoneman and the gunman came in. Definitely wasn't writing for only someone who's experienced systemic racism in this country. And in any way, there's no monolith to any of those groups, right? So everyone who's experienced oppression experiences it differently. And everyone who experiences suffering, even the same exact thing, supposedly, it's different. And so I really had so many images of so many people coming in and out that it really never felt like I was writing to one person. So I know people say like define your reader singular, but for me, it didn't work to do that. I had to sort of think of a collective.
And how, in doing that, how did you not get tripped up by feeling like, so one of the things that I think I've heard, I should say, and I've experienced gets confusing for people is that when they're writing for a collective, they start to think things like, well, but this person isn't going to like it if I swear. Well, this person isn't going to like it if I talk about religion. Well, this person isn't going to like it if I talk about fill in the blank. How did you reconcile that so that you didn't get away from your point and into people pleasing and trying to make all of your readers feel seen and happy, as opposed to staying centered in your message and your voice?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And it was hard, I would say. I mean, my editor and I kind of went back and forth on a lot of isms and a lot of words. And that's stuff that I feel strong about, that I really want to do the best I can. And at some point, I also, Elizabeth, had to say, not everything in this book will appeal to everyone. And I want to do the best I can. And then whatever isn't the best that is possible, maybe, I just hope I can learn the best I can from it. I feel like at some point I had to surrender a little bit on that. So doing your best and then hoping you learn the best is how I sort of think about it.
What's one of your biggest lessons that you learned about yourself while writing the book?
Oh my gosh. I mean, we need 5 more podcasts about that. Because I don't know if you honestly, I don't know if you felt this with each book. You've written so many books. It was such a healing journey for me. And I know that there was sort of the content is such as well, but also it's just such a revelatory experience about myself. I felt like I was in therapy. I mean, because there's this self-compassion piece, but there's also this piece of, really, I would say if I had to pick one, but I really don't know if I can. But I think one thing I learned about myself was that if you really can own and own your wisdom and your expertise in some small way, it's of better service to the reader and to yourself. That there's no use in me making myself small and no use in me making myself not good enough to write this book. I mean, that doesn't serve anyone, because I'm telling you, those thoughts came up all the time. And then I had to go back to, but what good does that do anyone? Right. So you kind of have to, as a writer, I think, learn to take up a little space and say, no, I'm good enough to write this book. I'm good enough to be here and do this.
And it will reach the right people, air quotes around right. I mean, I find that creative people are, and I don't want to lay a general blanket over anyone, but I find that in most instances, really, creative people are very humble people. And so we're not people who want to stand on the mountaintop and say, this book is the best and you've got to buy it right now and it's going to change your life and da-da-da. We're more likely to kind of turtle ourselves, right? Like crawl into our shell and just... But if you I'm a visual person. So if I imagine everyone crawling into their turtle shell, as opposed to everyone just being willing to stick their neck out, literally and figuratively, and see each other and realize that we're safe there and we're safe doing that. And that is how the collective expands. I mean, what I've been saying for years is that, and my true core belief about book writing is that it's one of the most vulnerable, healing, and expansive things you can do simultaneously. Yes. And I don't think a lot of people expect that. And because they don't expect it, when they start to feel vulnerable or when they start to feel like they kind of, it's like, wait, is it when you go into therapy, right? You're like,
that's
okay,
true.
Let's heal. Let's
get vulnerable. That's true.
Heal. Let's put it all on the table. Like, I'm here to pay you to tell me what I don't see about myself. But that's one way in which writing kind of is a solitary endeavor, because you'll have an epiphany of sorts and then go, well, who the hell do I call to tell me what the hell is going on about this?
You're right. So right. And I feel like along the way, you're constantly having to understand that nothing has to be perfect in any one moment, that it will all reveal itself, right? So even you've obviously gone through the beginning of the book, but my editor and I had this huge block with my, I had these ground rules and joy, and I could not figure out why that chapter was not sitting for me. It was just annoying me, and it was kind of sitting wrong for her. But this is late in the process that finally I realized, but it only came through writing the rest and understanding that things reveal themselves when they reveal themselves, which is so annoying for anyone like me who's kind of type A, right? So what I realized was, I can't define joy, because then I'd be using the same oppressive systems that I'm talking about using joy against as a liberatory practice. I know why my ground rules are annoying me, because they're my ground rules. They can't be your ground rules. So then it was so clear, like crystal clear, that this was a roadmap to your joy, speaking of the reader, and my ground rules are just there for inspiration and not for you to use necessarily. That all gelled very late in the manuscript, and so I totally agree with you. There's just this way that you have to sort of, it's not therapy you choose, but it's therapy you need.
Yeah. And it's therapy that comes up when you're like, wait, I didn't ask for this. I just wanted to write a book. I didn't, it's the difference. So what you just described to me is the difference between prescriptive and suggestive.
Yes.
So prescriptive writing comes from, in my estimate, approving energy. You want people to do what you're like. My third book, which is called You Cannot Be Serious, and it's 32 rules that I used and still to a degree use in my life to raise 5 kids while being an entrepreneur and like not losing my shit all the time, basically. At no point, and I was very clear with the reader, if one of these works for you, awesome. If 7 of them work, awesome. If you need to adapt them, do it. If you think I'm insane, please don't burn the book, but donate it, whatever.
Yes.
So, because I wasn't trying to prove that my approach was the approach. That's never my intention.
Right.
And so when you can recognize, I think that's a very subtle and incredibly wise thing that you touched on, that you tapped into you at the end there of, wait a minute, I'm actually perpetuating the same sort of thing that this whole book is in.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And I think what you just said about proving energy really struck me so deep in my heart, because I think that there's this way that I can imagine if we're writing to prove anything, it's not our most authentic writing, right?
I mean, that's the thing. And I work with people on this sometimes, and I found that it's most effective to do it from a place of incredible compassion, because I've been there before, as a business person or whatever. I've certainly been an approving energy many times in my life, in relationships, in business, where it's like, because the idea that I'm wrong is terrifying. The idea that we are wrong is like, oh my God, well, what does that mean? So it just takes you down this horrible path of not self-compassion. I mean, then we really need hands on heart. It's like, good Lord. But yes, there is an aspect of getting really comfortable with, what do we authentically want to say now, without any attachment to whether or not it works for the reader.
Exactly. And I think that's so hard when you're, like you were saying, you're used to doing that as an entrepreneur. And, I'm used to proving myself as a woman of color in medicine all the time. And,
yes. And isn't that interesting? Because medicine's a science.
Right. But, I'm always proving to myself, or, saying, no, I'm not the janitor or the social worker. I'm the doctor in the room to people who, ask me who I am, constantly.
Wow.
So you're proving yourself constantly. And at the same time, now you're doing something where you need to let that all go if your truest service is really going to be there. Right.
Yes. I mean, that's a topic. That's a TED Talk. Can you go do that next?
Yeah,
I really
seriously.
feel like that is right up your alley and your topic, because that is probably one of the most challenging aspects of writing nonfiction memoir specifically, but is being able to release. I mean, there's just, there's so much discourse around bestseller status and numbers and that's from a proving space, right? I mean, if we're going to get really honest, just because 100,000 people bought your book does not mean that any of them read it.
Right.
So I'm always intrigued by what authors' intentions are. And the vast majority of the ones I speak with, their intention is just like help one person, or I just want to put my message out there and it'll go where it goes. And I kind of have a patient, persistent trust about it.
Yes, exactly.
Right.
I can't imagine you having several books. Like, this sense of like, once they're out there, then they become this live organic thing. Like, just even talking to you or talking to any of my interviews about it, it feels like, oh, this is the magic now. Now it's out there, and now we get to talk about it organically, about, what this means to you as a reader, or what this means about what I wrote and how it impacted you, and how can what impacted you impact me further. I mean, it's just this beautiful cycle, right?
That's it. It's the synergy of that. And it's not having any expectations. For me, it's not having any expectations. It's about having curiosity, because what strikes somebody about, and what strikes me about a book, let's put it this way, is if I read a book, in many instances, if I talk with the author, or if I don't, but if I talk with the author and I say, my gosh, this story you told, or this one little line, or this one tiny revelation, or the way that you phrased this on page 92 really it just bowled me over. And they'll think, really? That's what got you? And they're shocked in a very positive way. But, I put a little blip in a post yesterday about sort of comparing having expectations when writing a book to running a marathon, which I've never done and will never do. But I was basically saying, like, if you're running a marathon and you're focused on a specific time, you kind of just accept that at some point you're probably going to have to pee down your leg. And then I was like, oh, Liz, that is the grossest analogy. Like, are you really going to put that out there? And the first comment that I got back on that post on Facebook was someone saying, this is so ironic or coincidental. I'm training for a marathon. And so, and I was like, and to think, and I even replied to her and I said, to think, I almost pulled that out.
Right.
Because I thought, how's this going to be received? But
right.
It's a good analogy. It was a good analogy for me. Now, some people are like, we're done. We're done. Yeah. I can't talk to you without seeing that visual now. So we're done. But the curiosity of it and the talking about it is the greatest joy, with no expectation and no attachment.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Well, your book, I could talk to you forever. This book is going to truly transform a very large number of people. I have absolutely no doubt about that I have goosebumps everywhere, because it's just it's my truth. I mean, it's just remarkable.
Thank you.
And
so much.
it's also so actionable. It's not just a story. There are so many different, from your work as a physician, from your work as a human, there are just so many actionable tactical steps that are simple. It's not like go off to the mountains of Siberia and hike. It's like, put your hand on your heart. These are just these little things. So we talked about doing a giveaway.
Yeah.
And so if people share to their stories or to your feed, probably easiest to your stories, but the top takeaway that you had from this episode, and tag both myself and Tanmeet.
Yes.
And I will put all of your info in the show notes.
Great.
We're going to draw 2 people who will get a copy of Joy is My Justice.
Yes. So exciting.
So go and do that. And gosh, thank you so much for being here with me and for chatting about this. I have a feeling this will not be our last podcast. It will definitely not be our last conversation. And I don't think it'll be our last podcast either.
I'm so honored to be here. It's really just a gift. So thank you.
Thank you so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode, this is your friendly reminder to follow or subscribe, leave a quick review, and share it with someone you know has a great story or message, but isn't sure what to do next. Also, remember to check out publishaprofitablebook.com for book writing resources and tips, and to see all the ways we can work together to get your book out into the world. Again, thanks so much for listening, and I'll talk with you again soon.